The documentary is about a Pentecostal church in southern West Virginia. They practice the faith of serpent handling in their church, which has gone on for 50 years in West Virginia, 70 years. And that's what it's about. It's about a small church and his family, the congregants who go there, but mainly it's about Mac. I met Mac through a friend. I had moved there. I had never really heard of the faith, and people had described this to me, and I wanted to learn more about it. And so I went down there and I met Mac, and he is an incredibly open, charming, friendly person. And he loved to talk about his faith, and invited me down, was very welcoming, and I developed a relationship with him from there.
Mark and I have worked together for a long time on a lot of different projects, and he asked me if I wanted to do the sound design for this, and I agreed, and so immediately started formulating ideas based on really a verbal description of what he was shooting. And at first I didn't get to see a whole lot of footage because things were just kind of being put together at that point. So a lot of it sort of just existed in the imagination, and we started passing files back and forth. So I would compose some things in the studio and send it to Mark, and he would give feedback as to whether or not, that it may or may not work. And that was really, I think, largely how the whole production kind of came together, was sort of a back and forth that way between the image and the sound.
Well, you should talk more too about like the process, because it was this incredible process. A lot of those sounds are recorded banjo and guitar.
Right. Well, all of the sound in the soundtrack is composed of essentially traditional bluegrass instruments and string-based instruments, playing off of a lot of the music that Mark was sharing with me from his various shoots. In a couple of cases, he just sent me some music and said, listen to this, and it's really lively. The music plays a really important part of their service. So we had a couple of mutual friends who were bluegrass musicians record banjo and dobro, and all of that was processed through a variety of means to get the sort of trance-like drone timbres that appear throughout the film. I just remember distinctly one particular recording that he sent me that had, I think it was a hollow body guitar through an amplifier, and it was a poor recording. Everything was really blown out, but it had this really great lo-fi, tinny sound to it that I think, for me, really kind of captured the sound of that place without having to kind of be there. And that played a big role in how the textures of the sound came across, a little bit thin, a little bit distant, and a little bit tinny in that way, almost to the point that at times it might be a little harsh to the ear.
Serpent handlers are constantly faced with social pressure and even persecution from other people in the area.
I had just never heard of this faith before, and I wanted to learn more about it. And Mac is such a good teacher. Like, he's a very patient person, and so open. And they invited me into the church, and so I just continued to go down, and I really didn't have an idea of where the story was going to go. I just wanted to learn about it, and it wound up going in unpredictable ways.
Yeah, I mean, I suspect to a certain amount of the interest, at least speaking for myself, was, we both, having been born and raised in Minnesota and then moving to the South, it was a very different experience for us. And I don't know, maybe seeing those kinds of things as outsiders a little bit, I think for me really piqued my interest in participating with the project.
I felt like I didn't get to spend enough time down there working on the project, and I kind of I wanted them to be able to tell their own story. And West Virginia can be stereotyped in a lot of ways, and I wanted them to speak in their own voice. There are very few people still performing that kind of service, church service, and yeah, there's maybe, I don't know how many churches, but they're very extremely small churches. This was a small church. Mac's church was mainly family, friends, not very small congregation. I made clear my intentions when I went down there that I just wanted to learn, and I've kind of worked with the family throughout the course of the project as collaborators. Through the editing process, we kind of talked about things. There were some developments in the story that were really of a sensitive nature, and I wanted to be respectful of the family. And they knew that Mac would have wanted me to finish the story. They wanted me to finish the story. So I felt like I really owed it to them to kind of tell it honestly and make sure that they were apprised the whole way along, because they had so much trust in me throughout the course of the project. And I wanted to make sure that I reciprocated.
Everything changed. We're dancing around this. I don't know how to address it without giving a spoiler, but at a certain point in the production, everything changed in terms of the approach. And initially, a lot of the sound that I was doing was maybe a little bit darker than it needed to be. A lot of that initial work was scrapped after a certain point, and things became much more about giving a sense of place, a sense of emotion, something that a prolonged, experience, dragging out time to a certain extent, to really kind of focus in on that particular, moment that happens.
Going into this project, I was new to West Virginia. I had heard about this faith, and I didn't know a lot about it. And you always try and approach a project with minimal expectations. You try and keep an open mind, but I didn't know what to expect. I do not care for snakes. They petrify me. So that was one thing that I had to overcome. But really, Mac made the process so easy, because you would think there's this guy who obviously is really compelled by this kind of hard to understand faith. So you would think maybe he's going to be kind of a fire and brimstone personality, but he wasn't that way. Mac was one of the most open, friendly people I've ever met, and he just made friends like that. He made friends instantly, and he made me feel like I was a friend, made me feel incredibly welcome there. So on the first day, I went away saying wow, this is amazing. Totally blew away any preconceptions I had about him or his faith.
My perceptions definitely changed once I saw the final edit, and saw everything kind of coming together, or maybe not necessarily the final edit, but once the edit started coming together, especially hearing Mac talk about how, comparing it to drugs, experiencing this kind of high, which is something that I hadn't really considered in that state of mind. I haven't really considered the state of mind that they were in doing that, and I think that plays into the sound design as well, is that kind of feeling of elation that happens when you are in a very dangerous situation, but doing it, for this faith, for this thing that they believe very, very strongly in.
Yeah, I think it's hard to understand if you don't have it.
Yeah.
It's really hard.
Yeah, and I think, in terms of that perception, I think that's one of the things that I tried to do, is maybe try to put the viewer/listener maybe in that situation a little bit, to maybe give them a little bit of a sense of what that might feel like through the more droney kind of textures that happen, the kind of choral type timbres that come out, and the sort of consistent rising and falling of the dynamics.
When I called them about coming back down to do some follow-up interviews, which happened, a year after I had quit filming the first segment, they were completely welcoming. And that's just the kind of great people they are. So they're, I met a lot of really great people who are going to be friends for life working on this project. And